So here we have seen the variations, how the variations they inherit from one generation to another generation. The second part is that evolution. So we learned about heredity. Now let us see the evolution. Both are linked together. So evolution means formation of a new species, which is a very gradual process. But how the new species is evolved from the pre-existing species? A new species comes from the pre-existing one by accumulation of so many variations. And not only that, there are some other factors which also leads to the formation of new species. So let us see what are those factors. Basically, the basic idea of evolution is explained with an illustration here, that is taking an example of some beetles and their colors. Let us see that what is that illustration. Here there are some set of beetles. In a jungle, in a forest, there are some red color beetles. So these are all red color beetles. They are in the forest, that is they are in the leaves, they are feeding on the leaves of the bushes. So as they are red in color, the bushes are green in color, which are quite contrast. They are easily identified by the crow, which eat the beetles. Crows can easily identify the red color beetles because they are contrast and opposite color to the leaves. So by that, the crows they pick and eat the red color beetles. Suddenly what happened is that in the red color beetle population, one variation has occurred. One of the beetle, it has got green color. That is a variation. And this variation, this change, it is happened through the genes. So by that it can pass this variation to its progeny. The green color can be passed to the next generations. So this is a variation. Now what happened? Because of this green color, as the green color blends with the leaves of which are in green color, so the green beetle is not being eaten by the crows. Crow cannot identify the green beetle because the leaves are green. Camouflage takes place. That means blending of its color with its surroundings. So only the red beetles are identified. Green beetles are not identified by the crows. So the green beetle population is increasing because crows are not being eaten. Crows are not eating the beetles. So beetles are not being eaten by the crows. Why the green beetles are not being eaten by the crows? Because the green beetles are not identified as they are in green in color. So crows are identifying red. So gradually the population of red beetles is decreased and green beetles increased. You can see that here the green color is an advantageous variation for the beetle population. So by the generations on, you can see the green beetle population is more, red beetle population is less. So the variation, the green color, it fetched the organism. So this is the situation 1. Now let us see the another situation. Now let us see the second situation. Here again the same background, that is the forest. There are a group of beetles which are red in color. They are being eaten by the crows. Red is a contrast color, so by that the crows can easily pick up the beetles. So suddenly there is a variation. There a beetle developed a blue color. In the first situation we have seen a green color. Here the variation is blue color. So the blue color beetles, that is a variation which it can pass to the progeny. The blue color beetle is also producing blue color beetles. But the crows, they can identify the blue color better than the red color. So the red beetle population is more. The crows are identifying blue color. So the blue population is less. So here the variation is not advantageous. In this case, in the second situation. Now suddenly what happened? An elephant stepped on these beetles. This is the elephant foot. So the elephant stepped and all the beetles died except a few, which are only blue. Only a few blue beetles, they survived. Rest of the beetles died. So only these 4 blue beetles. So what happens? The blue beetles, they continue their progeny. After generations and generations, mostly the new generations will be blue, So it became a very important character of the beetle, that is blue color. Actually it started as a very rare variation. Here rare, all are red, only one is blue, rare variation. But here the total group is blue, the whole generations are blue. Means a single rare variation can become a common characteristic of an organism. That we can understand from this situation. Now let us see the differences between the two situations. In the first situation, whatever the variation has occurred in this beetle population, that variation, it is an advantageous variation. Advantage for the green beetle population to grow. You can say it is an adaptation. Blending with surroundings to survive is an adaptation. It led to the survival of the green beetle population. You call it as natural selection. Natural selection. So the variations that are helpful for the survival of the organism, that is called as natural selection. So this is one way how the evolution takes place. That means how the variations that bring out differences here in the populations. In the second situation, here the variation is not advantageous. It is not helpful for the survival of the beetle. The blue color is not at all helpful for the survival of the beetle. But even then the blue color beetles are evolved. That means even though the variations are not helpful, even though the variations are not adaptations, not helpful for adaptation, even then in some cases the variations are passed. That means even though they are not helpful, it doesn't mean that only the helpful variations they pass. So evolution takes place with adaptation, without adaptation also, that we can observe it here. So this is the basic idea of genetic drift. In this case it is accidental. Here the elephant, it stamped on the beetles, that's why the blue beetle survived. The population of the beetle is very small, that's why when the elephant stamps it, all the other color beetles died and blue beetles existed. Accidental. So such kind of accidents, when the populations are small, it may bring the evolution with the variations which are not helpful also. So here the variation is useful variation, here the evolution process goes on. Here without any useful variation, without any adaptations also, we can observe that evolution. So we see from this example we take one more situation. So whatever the red color beetles are there, these beetles are growing on the bushes. Suddenly the bush has got some disease. So because of the disease, the leaves are becoming very small. The leaves are eaten by some other insect. Or the bush has got some infection, so whether there is no food in the leaves. So beetles, they grow in their size, number of beetles are more, bushes are less, food is less. So the beetles, they reduce in their size. The beetle size is reduced. Small. Can you consider this as a variation? Due to the insufficiency of the food, the organism reduces in its size. Do you think it is a variation? So can this variation, we cannot say it is a variation because it is not variation, but will this change reflects in the next generations? No. So it will not happen, because if the leaves grow properly after the certain time, after the disease period of the plant is completed, again the leaves are growing well, then the beetles eat on that and they grow in size. So the change, the variation means it should be, the change should happen in the genetic material of the organism, in the germ cells of the organism. Unless until the DNA is not changed, the genes are not changed, the change is not reflected in the next generations. This was tested. So inheritance means there must be change in the genetic material. The genes must be changed regarding that character, then only it is possible. Otherwise it is not possible. So to test that, several scientists conducted experiments. See, they have taken a mice, they cut the tail of the mice. So the next generation mice, it is born with tail even though the tail is cut. So likewise, so many generations, they cut the tail of the mice. But even then, generation after generation, the new generations, they are born with tails. Why? Why it is like that? Because cutting of tail is a physical one. It does not make any change in the genes of the rat. It is not a variation. Even though 100 times, in 100 generations you get the tail of the mother, or you will not get the tailless mice. All the mice are born with tail. Means, physically, if a person accidentally loses a hand or leg in an accident, it doesn't mean that his children will be born without hand or leg. It is not inherited. The inheritance happens only if there is any change in the genetic material, only if the changes or variations, that means changes in the genes, that is only reflected in the progenies, coming up generations. So in the previous example, we have seen how different organisms are evolving. We have seen the microevolution with the example of the beetles. There we have seen red color, blue color, green color beetles. But here, there are different kinds of beetles have come in different colors, but all are of same species. That means the red color beetle can reproduce with green, green can reproduce, can mate with blue, they can take part in reproduction. So you cannot say it as a different species, same species, some variations, that is microevolution. But how a new species is formed? Let us see. Here there is a population called X. X type of beetles are there here in a particular specific location. They are isolated. They are in the forest, in the bushes, growing up. Suddenly, one crow, it picked up a beetle X. It has taken it to a long distance, which actually the beetles cannot travel. And it dropped the beetle here without eating it. It left the X here. Here there is a beetle population which is named as X1. Now this X, if just think that if this X is able to reproduce, able to mate with X1, this X, and in the new location X1, they produce a beetle. So this beetle, it is isolated. New genes are introduced into this X1 group. So it leads to the variations, and this beetle is having the genetic flow has got some new genes here. So here it will develop its population. After a number of generations, after so many variations, here in the earlier stage when it was taken there was a possibility of reproduction between these two. But after a number of generations, so many variations happens. So the variations that takes place in X1 group is different. The variations that takes place in X group is different. So after so many generations, this beetle cannot reproduce with this beetle. This beetle cannot mate with the other beetle X1. So if the reproduction is not possible between two different organisms, you consider them as separate species. That is what happens. So you can think that, you can say that new species is formed here. This is called speciation. Say for example, there are two groups of beetles. Here one group, here one group, two groups. These two groups are separated by a big stream or river. So there is no possibility of this beetles to going here, this beetles going here. Actually earlier all the beetles were same group, but suddenly one river came. Because of flood or something, there some river came. It divided the group, the same group. This is X, same group, divided into two by the river. So they became two groups. After they are divided, made into two groups, after they are isolated, in the initial stages, this can mate with this one, it can reproduce. But after so many generations, this will get different set of variations. This will get different set of variations because they are isolated, separate. And after a number of generations, this becomes a particular species, this becomes a particular species. So the variations get accumulated. Here different variations are accumulated, here different variations are accumulated. So this is different, that is different. So the sperm cell of this cannot fuse with the egg cell of that organism. If such state is identified, you can consider this is separate species, this is separate species. If the male cell of this can fuse with female cell, you cannot say different species. After so many generations, here this population, whatever the population is formed here, this forms an entirely different species compared to the other. So there is no reproduction, fusion of male and female gamete takes place between two different species. In this way, every time a new species is evolved. So this is the way how these various species are evolved on this planet. This is the way how the diversity has come. That is explained and observed by Charles Darwin. So the variations, about the variations, we got the information by the observations of Gregor John Mendel and the process of evolution, that is explained by Charles Darwin. So he has made certain observations. So there are some proofs for evolution that we will see in the next part of the lesson.